Welcome to everything you need to know before you embark on your canyons adventure. We have a wonderful panel today, and first I'd like to introduce you to NetHab's Field Operations Manager, Corbin Hawkins. Thank you so much for being with us today, everyone. Corbin, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Okay, thanks, Kendall, and as always, we appreciate everything you do and happy to be working with you yet again. It seems like we're almost doing these on a daily basis now, which is really great, knowing that we're moving back into the field. Today we've got an all-star lineup for you. We've got Matt Turner and Gene Lawrence, our expedition leaders, not only in the canyons area, but in quite a few of the U.S. national parks. So guys, you want to take a moment? Matt, I'll start with you and just give us a quick introduction before we move into myself and Renata.
Thank you, Corbin. My name is Matt Turner. I live in Prescott, Arizona. I've been with NetHab for, I think, about six years now. And I travel throughout the West, and I look forward to sharing my knowledge with you today.
Okay. Gene?
Hello, I'm Gene Lawrence. I've been guiding with Natural Habitat since 2015, and I have spent time here in the Canyons country guiding, so it is an area that I'm very familiar with and that I love, so hope to share it with you.
Thanks, guys, and we'll touch back and get to know you a little further here in a moment. But before we do that, again, my name is Corbin Hawkins. I'm the Field Operations Manager, which pre-pandemic, that put me in a lot of really cool places, but the funny thing about being a field operations manager when there is no field, so to speak, is that you get to talk to me from my living room. So here we are getting excited to be back into the field. And Renata is our Director of Field Staff, or Head of Field Staff, excuse me, and she's going to just spend a few moments talking about what she does and how we've kind of coped with the COVID pandemic and what we're going to do moving forward. So Renata, I will give you the mic.
Thanks, Corbin. So hi, my name is Renata. I've been working with NetHab for about 8 years in a variety of capacities as trip owner for a lot of our actually national parks trips, Alaska, Greenland, and then a lot of work up in Churchill as well. And now I oversee all of our field staff as well as our COVID protocols development and implementation. So really happy to chat with you guys on all things COVID.
Thanks, Renata. Let's jump right into it then. So I know you guys have worked tirelessly and endlessly on this protocol, and it's ever changing as we learn more and more good news, typically on a day-to-day basis. But why don't you run through what that protocol is, how you got there, and where we are today with all of that?
Of course. So we have actually been running trips since last July. We have run trips in Yellowstone, Mexico, Costa Rica, the Galapagos, and Kenya, and are ramping up to get into our busy spring and summer season. So when COVID first happened, we determined that we needed a group of individuals that were really fully concentrated on creating these protocols. So what I want to do is take you a little bit through how our protocols are created, because a trip that is running tomorrow is going to look a lot different from, or could, excuse me, look a lot different from a trip that is running in May, June, July, just because of all the developments that we're having with vaccine distributions. We're vaccinating about 2.1 million people a day, and case numbers are going down substantially, and the availability of tests is increasing quite a bit. So with that, we have to continue to analyze and adapt our protocols to the changing information and situation. So first and foremost, in creating these protocols, a lot of research needed to happen. The task force researched recommendations from both the CDC and the World Health Organization to create the skeleton of those protocols. After the skeleton was created, it was then incredibly important for us to collaborate with other individuals within and other companies within the adventure and outdoor travel industry to share best practices. So we had a lot of meetings with other individuals from other companies to get more insight on how they were developing their protocols. We work with a lot of different individuals and partners in the field, from restaurants, hotels, activity partners, and it's very important for us to get an understanding of how they are setting up their specific protocols, and also vet those protocols to ensure that they're meeting our standards. So we've created a partner vetting process. If a partner is not able to meet our expectations, we either work with them to be able to meet those expectations, or unfortunately, we're not able to work with them for the time being. We have developed a screening process to screen our field staff, so expedition leaders, ops staff, as well as our guests, with daily symptom and temperature checks. And then we do some pretty in-depth trainings on how to actually implement these protocols in the field. So all of our guides and field staff, prior to the start of a season, have a pretty in-depth conversation with myself to discuss how we are actually implementing every component of the protocols to their trip. And we make sure we do this season specifically because we're seeing things change, and we want to make sure that our guides and ops staff have the most up-to-date information. And then finally, what we're looking at and continuing to work on is making sure that expectations are set with our guests so that they know how to decrease their risk of getting COVID as soon as they leave the house. So that is expectations with these types of webinars, information on our website. And then also we send you within your pre-departure briefing 2 KN95 masks, hand sanitizer, alcohol wipes, as well as information for you to read and help you understand the best ways to travel to reduce that risk of getting COVID on a trip. So it's really important that we continue to look at this. We look at our protocols on a weekly basis and are constantly in communication still with other individuals from the outdoor industry to make sure that we are at the forefront of our protocols as we move into the spring and into the summer.
And Renata, I've seen this document. It's huge. It's somewhat 20 pages, I believe, and I've been trained on it, as we all have. But I think the big question for guests is what does this mean for them, and how does that look on a trip? And what you have done is pared that down to our combination intervention approach. Do you want to run through what that means for us and how it'll look in application on a trip?
Of course. So in creating these protocols, we determined that the best way to mitigate the spread of COVID transmission is by a combination of interventions. That way, if one intervention fails or is not possible, we have additional layers to help us with mitigating that risk. So first and foremost is respiratory hygiene. That means wearing a face covering when you are indoors, when you are within 6 feet of another individual, and when you are in our vehicles. So that is sort of the first layer of defense. We are all quite familiar with masks at this point. Next is physical distancing. So we have really small groups, which is fantastic. So it is quite easy to physically distance on our trips. Our canyons programs will have an ops person as well as 2 expedition leaders. So it's also the case that if we have groups that are faster or slower, we can spread out. So keeping that 6 feet of space between you and anyone outside of your traveling companion whenever possible. And then we also have enhanced sanitation. So we are adding an additional operations person to our trip to focus solely on implementing these protocols. So sanitizing high touch services is incredibly important, especially in our vehicles and any of the equipment that we use. And then finally is hand hygiene. So you'll be getting hand sanitizer before you depart your house, and it's also readily available on trip. And we also make sure we have ample opportunities for everyone to be washing their hands before, after meals, or if there's any communal equipment that is touched. Now, with the combination intervention approach, we started our protocols with this when vaccines were not available and when testing was not reliable. So we've gotten to a point where it is very, very easy to get tests, and they're also, the timing of those tests are very reliable. So starting on May 1st, any departures after May 1st, all guests will be required to take a test within 5 days of their departure and show a negative test result when they arrive. When it comes to vaccines, we're getting a lot of questions on vaccines. So I will note that at this point, we're not requiring our guests to get vaccinated prior to a trip. At this point, they're not widely available enough for us to do that, and we continue to revisit that on a weekly basis. And another question surrounding individuals that are vaccinated, I'm sure everyone on this call has either gotten a vaccine or knows someone that has gotten vaccinated at this point, is if you need to get a test if you are vaccinated. And at this point, the CDC is noting that if you are traveling, you do need to get a COVID test prior to traveling. So at this point, that is the case, but the key with these protocols and how rapidly information is changing is flexibility. So if there are any changes to our protocols, we'll be sure to reach out to you prior to the start of the trip to what those changes might be.
Okay, thank you, Renata. Throughout the rest of the conversation here, we'll probably pepper in some more to-dos as far as COVID is related, but I think that pretty well covers our COVID protocol. So moving forward, before we jump into the nuts and bolts of this trip and how it all works, I just wanted to speak with Jean, you, and Matt, you as well, a little candidly on what you love so much about this place. So Jean, I'll start with you and just tell me why you love it here, why you like guiding here, and what keeps you coming back so many years later.
Well, it's kind of a combination of desert and also water. Water coming in the forms of rivers, flash flood, monsoon rains, very unpredictable times of water, which has shaped these incredible canyons over millennia. And the colors and the textures of the canyon rock is just amazing. And these beautiful skyscapes like we see in front of us here in Zion National Park are just like nothing else you'll see in the United States. So also the adaptations of plants and animals to deal with these very arid conditions is quite amazing. And so the beauty that these plants present to you is sometimes quite surprising. Especially in Zion, we'll see areas where there's hanging gardens and flowers that you would never expect. So there's a lot of surprises. And those are the things that always keep me engaged in canyon country, are the surprises.
Yeah, thanks, Jean. I love your approach to that answer, because when I think of Canyonlands, I certainly don't think of water. I think of desert. So I like that insight from somebody who truly knows the place. And Matt, you live in Arizona. Tell us a little bit about what keeps you there.
Well, I've been in the region for quite some time, and as you can see with the images that you see here and what we're going to see ahead, it's a unparalleled place to live in if you have the opportunity to do so. And of course, certainly visiting as well. It's just eye-catching, eye-popping landscapes. And for me, I've been drawn to it since an early age. I moved into the region in the early 80s, and there was an author, or actually he's passed, but a gentleman named Wallace Stegner, who's a relatively well-known Western author, who coined this term, a sense of place. And for me, I latched onto that at an early age and have been engaged with this landscape ever since that time. And the geology, the flora and fauna, The human presence is all just fascinating, and I really will continue probably living here till my dying day for a long time to come.
Long time to come. Thanks, Matt. I believe what I heard you say is that your guest room is available for month-to-month rentals.
Yeah.
So guys, let's get into it. You know, I try to approach these from a perspective of a guest, and that I am going to be asking you some questions on what the trip is going to be like, how I should prepare for it. And, you know, I've been on these trips with you guys, and I do know the answers to a lot of this stuff, but I really just want to kind of answer some of the typical questions we get before these trips, before guests feel the need to ask them. So I'd like to start with what do I bring? You know, if I'm signed up for this trip and I'm packing, what's in my bag? What type of gear do I bring? Do I need flip-flops, water shoes, rain jacket, parka? Why don't you, Jean, why don't you run me through what sort of things to pack?
Sure. Well, I just mentioned the elevation changes that we experience from Springdale in the west part of Zion up to Bryce. We're going from about 3,000 feet and as high as 9,000 feet. So you can get quite a variety of temperatures in those elevations. So layering is so important. And there'll be times when it's quite warm and you might want a pair of shorts and also long pants for evening. I actually wear pants that zip off so I can convert between shorts and long pants. I find those really handy. Also, you know, layering with clothing that you can take off as the day warms up, and then you can layer back on in the evening. So a jacket, it does sometimes rain. A raincoat would always be handy, and you know, light items that you can also add on with like a heavier, maybe a fleece or something, because we do experience colder temperatures in the morning and the evening. Once again, Springdale, you know, you might go swimming and you might want to bring your swimming suit. I definitely know you can go swimming in St. George. So a swimming suit would be handy. So we actually see quite a range of temperatures. And then also for footwear, when it's quite warm, I like to wear a sturdy sandal like Tevas or Chacos that are good in water, that won't come off of your feet. You know, they have Velcro, and so that you can walk in water. We have an opportunity to do that, especially in Zion. And also light hikers. So we'll have a lot of hiking opportunities, and I'd wear a sturdy, lightweight hiking shoe, preferably mesh, because it's off, you know, we're in the spring and summer months. So full leather hiking boots might be a little more than you need, but light hikers are going to come in really handy.
Okay, yeah, you can kind of see in this photo here some of the footwear that might be appropriate. But what about money? Do I need to consider, Matt, I'll switch to you here. Should I consider tips for the hotels, restaurants? What should I prepare for as far as cash and money is concerned?
Well, certainly carrying a bit of cash with you when we're visiting locations where we might, where you might have the opportunity to do a little personal shopping. I think that's a good thing to have, or certainly a credit card. But in instances where, you know, we're either in restaurants or hotels or other places where NatHab is kind of fronting the experience, you know, NatHab covers that as far as the tips are concerned. The only instance where tips are not covered is for your guides. And the language that speaks to that is actually in your pre-departure briefing, giving you a few more specifics about what that amount might be and what you might choose. So that's, I think does that cover that? I believe that.
Yeah. I think that's perfect.
Corbin, I just might add, if you go back to the previous slide,
sure.
just real quickly, this clothing that you see with the people here is as you can see, there's some people wearing shells and wearing lots of layers. So this is pretty typical, but I will say that, you know, in your day-to-day activities, when you're traveling, you're going to be carrying a small backpack that is going to have the necessary items for you to either utilize like rainwear or to discard into in case you want to peel and put that away. So, you know, you'll have something with you during the course of the day that will allow you to either remove or put clothing back on, and then your main luggage will be packed away. So just remember that all these things are going to be available for you as we're traveling from location to location.
Go ahead, Jean.
And I just forgot to mention the all important hat, a sun hat and sunscreen, because the sun is intense. And you may think, I want to get tan, but even just having sunscreen on, you know, you're still going to get sun exposure. And then the hat is really going to block unwanted rays. So please bring a sun hat.
Thank you for the clarification. So I'm packed and I'm ready. I've gone to the ATM, I've packed my hat and all my layers, and I've just arrived at St. George Airport. And just to kind of keep with our schedule here on this webinar, I'm going to just speak to this myself. When you arrive at St. George Airport, if you're arriving on the day of your trip, you can expect to meet your guide, either Jean or Matt or whoever it may be on your specific departure date, to be there at the airport waiting for you. They'll have a sign, they'll be well logoed, and you can't miss them. So they'll be there to pick you up. If you arrive beforehand, you will be required to take a taxi or otherwise a shuttle to your lodging, and that will all be arranged, and we have information on that. So feel free to reach out to your adventure specialist on more information on what to do should you be arriving before your trip starts. But excuse me. So when you do arrive, you will be picked up in a van that looks somewhat like this, or this exact van potentially. Matt, do you want to run through a little bit of the specifics about these vehicles, what makes them so special, and how we kind of move about in these throughout the week?
Certainly. These vans are, they really provide the ultimate experience for travelers in getting to see beauty spots and wildlife. And one particular thing about it is obviously these rooftop hatches that you see a gentleman poking up through the top of the van, and there's one over every bench seat, and they really help us get to see things from higher vantages and get to see wildlife without having to get out of the van and possibly scare wildlife away. So that's really a really kind of unique aspect with the NatHab vehicle offering. In regards to, you know, the seating and the things that are in the van, there's lots of creature comforts, snack items and water and drinks and all that. And then we do our best to, you'll get more clarity on this, but as far as some of the COVID protocols that are going to take place for travel will require that we space people out appropriately in the vans, etc. And so, yeah, lots of great amenities in these vans, and they're really, we travel real nicely on in them. They're great.
Yeah, one of the things we pride ourselves on is that everybody gets a window seat. So although these are what, 12, 14 something passenger vans, we'll never fill them to that extent. Everybody gets a window seat. And just to reiterate the COVID thing, everybody will be required to wear masks at all times in the vans and any other time that we can't socially distance, just to reiterate. So it sounds like we spend a lot of time in these vans on this trip, you know, whether it's going to a trailhead for hiking, going to view wildlife, going to breakfast, whatever it is. But it's also our main mode of transportation to and fro our lodging. Oh, excuse me, let me back up. Sorry, I got ahead of myself there. We do have another form of transportation that we'll be utilizing on the trip, and that's helicopters. Jean, do you want to run through what the helicopter ride looks like and tell me what that's going to entail and how we board and all of those things?
Well, the helicopter ride is a scenic flight opportunity over Bryce Canyon National Park. And that's done in the morning when the light is very good. And it's wonderful opportunity to fly over this amphitheater and look at hoodoos. And so it's about a 20-minute scenic ride, and everyone, of course, is on a window, and it's nothing can parallel the view from above. So it's a great way to see Bryce from the air.
And similarly to the vans, masks will be required. And as you saw in the previous photo, there will be people there to help you on and board. So if this is a fear of yours, fret not. We've done this before, and we've got people that are completely capable of helping you get in and out of the helicopter safely. So back to my previous point, to talk accommodations a little bit, where we'll be staying and the types of locations we'll be visiting. Jean, I'll continue with you here.
Sure.
As I just look through these pictures, if you just want to run through kind of the types of hotels that this trip will be staying at, and maybe a little bit about why we choose locations like this.
Right. So we're looking right now at, this is right outside the gate of Zion National Park. And the reason why we choose the hotels we do is because of location. We want to be able to access the parks at sunrise, sunset. We don't want to be commuting a half an hour to some other location. We want quick access to the parks. And so that's the main reason we choose the places that we do. And also I can mention at Bryce and at Grand Canyon on the North Rim, we're staying in historic hotels. So our cottages, these are places that have history. And so I think they also have a lot of charm and character. They're historic. So you might want to bring earplugs because sometimes you might have, be in some kind of like a duplex situation, might hear some a little bit of your neighbor's movements, but by all means, these places are wonderfully appointed, very comfortable, and I think you'll find that you'll sleep very well.
And we also stay in places like this here in St. George, just your standard hotel. And again, it's all about location. This is right downtown. This is a quick walk to anything you might need pre or post trip. So just trying to place us in favorable locations throughout the trip, whether it's a historic building inside the park, just outside, or in your departure destination here in St. George. One of the silver linings we've had in this pandemic is that it's forcing us outside, and particularly during mealtime, we find that we've really been able to elevate our dining experiences and get outside while we eat. Matt, do you want to share a little bit more with us about that?
Yes, you're not going to go wrong with food on our canyon trip. I can tell you that. So we are, there's a variety of different eating establishments and places that we enjoy indoor dining, and then of course the outdoor sort of field experience where we're doing either a breakfast or a lunch or possibly even a dinner in the field. That's all part of this trip, and we do our best to accommodate dietary restrictions when we're out there in whatever location. Certainly in the restaurants, we can accommodate all that. But we also, on indoor settings, we will do our very best to eat outside, to be mindful about COVID. And a number of our restaurants that we'll be visiting or eating at all have outdoor seating, which is great. And and then on the field side of it, we are sometimes in very unique locations, and sometimes it's impromptu. We may at a particular place decide that because of the route we've chosen that we may choose to do a meal in an outdoor setting at a particular location that may not necessarily be on the schedule. And we're going to try and take advantage of that as much as we can, particularly during these times when we're trying to be separate in some way or socially separated as much as we can in our travels.
Of course, and I will note, and it's actually happened on some of the trips that we have run during the pandemic, is that If at any time the guides or the ops person feel uncomfortable with the dining situation, maybe there's too many people or they see that our protocols aren't being followed, we're within our full capability to make that adjustment last minute and go find a place that's more suitable per our COVID protocols. Okay, so I'm packed, I'm ready. I've just arrived in St. George. I know what types of vehicles we're going to be in. I know where we're staying. I know kind of what we're eating. But what are we doing? One of the big things on this trip, and I know a lot of the questions that we get are in regards to the mule ride. So I figured we would just tackle this one right off the bat before we get into some of the other activities that we'll be participating in on this trip. So Jean, why don't you run us through what the mule ride looks like and just speak to that experience.
Right, so here I am on a mule. This particular mule, his name was Moonshine. And I asked the wrangler, why is he named Moonshine? And the wrangler said, because he's so smooth. But this outfitter that we use on the North Rim, they are really good. They know the mules, they know safety. I've been really impressed by the rides, multiple rides I've been on with them. And we actually end up having a choice of riding on the rim or going down into the canyon. We don't go all the way to the river because that would be an overnight trip, but we go down to the Supai Tunnel. So you go through several layers of the Grand Canyon layers. And you know, a great thing about riding is that you don't have to look at the trail. The mule's going to do that, and you can look around. You can be looking at the rocks, at the birds in the trees, you know, looking all around. So I find it just a great way to travel. And it's very comfortable. Once you get down to the Supai Tunnel, you get a chance to get off, walk around, take photos, stretch your legs. So it's totally geared for, let's say, just tourists, right? You don't have to be an equestrian. You don't know how to ride. They have it set up for, you know, making everything easy for you, and the mules know their job, so you don't need to know how to do extensive riding. It's a great activity. I think it's fantastic, and they certainly help you getting on. For example, there's a mounting block, so you don't have to know how to get into a saddle from the ground. They wranglers help you, so it's very safe and a very enjoyable way to see the canyon.
Yeah, it looks like an absolute blast. On top of the horseback, or the mule riding, excuse me, I keep wanting to say horses, but they are in fact mules. We will be spending a lot of time on the ground, it sounds like. And I know that these itineraries differ from a lot of what NatHab does, in that, you know, we're not necessarily always looking for wildlife, which we'll touch on in a minute, but we spend a lot of time on the ground, walking about and checking out the sites. Matt, do you want to help me run through what
Sure.
these trails look like and the type of difficulty that we're going to experience while on foot?
Certainly. So first, I just want to say that any outing that we do is optional. Okay, so you all have, you can make your a decision to partake or not, and then if you don't, then we're going to do our very best to give you alternatives so that you're happy at the end of the day. And so as far as the hiking is concerned, we try to follow, kind of land in the middle of a sort of a moderate hiking experience, which entails things that are, maybe it might be a 2 or 3 mile hike during the trip that may not have a lot of elevation gain to it, maybe a few hundred feet or so, or it might be more of an elevation gain and less mileage. But on either side of that is also, we can offer something that might be a little more strenuous, or something that might be a little easier. It could be, the easier could be a rim walk on a paved trail for some that wish to go that route. Others may wish to do something like this that's a little more demanding, and we can do to accommodate you all in that. And so it's you know, when we're out on the ground, we have hiking sticks and hiking poles, and we have other things that will make your hiking easier if you need it. And we do a lot of interpretation along the way, and also give you some silent time so you can enjoy the space and enjoy the place.
And Matt, just to kind of touch on gear again, in preparation for these trips, do I need to bring my walking sticks, binoculars, camera gear? What sort of stuff will you provide, and what sort of stuff should I bring on my own as far as hard gear goes?
Well, we essentially provide the binoculars are provided by NatHab. The hiking poles are provided by NatHab. Some of the, as far as cameras, you know, the essentials that you have with you, obviously cameras and water bottles, and, you know, the clothing items like rainwear you're going to bring with you. But those extras that are often important in making your hiking easier, we provide.
Okay, fair enough.
And we even provide water bottles in the front end of the trip. So we will be providing water bottles and, for instance, a coffee mug in the beginning of the trip. So it's not an absolute necessity for you to bring your own water bottle. If you wish, you can, but we will provide them if you want one.
And there's also quite a few opportunities for photos. I mean, like you said at the beginning of this, Matt, the whole region is just spectacularly photogenic. So for those photographers in the group, I always say the best camera you can bring is the one that you have. But specifically for these trips, I carry a range of lenses from 14 millimeters to 200. Would you say you need much more than that for this region, Matt?
No, it's not exact. That's what I would bring. Yes, I think that on the wildlife front, it's probably not as much of a focus on wildlife, so you probably don't need a 300 or 400 or 500 millimeter lens. But it's more landscape oriented, and so the kind of that lower end from 20. Actually, a wide angle lens would be good too if you have something that's in the 18 millimeter, even 20, let's say 17 to 24 millimeter would be great. But whether it's a zoom, you know, ultra zoom, or a compact camera, and even those of you who are not specifically geared towards or wanting to do photography all the time, but want to bring out the cell phone to or smartphone to capture an image, which they do a great job at, then we can provide instruction on that if or some little angle on it that you may not be aware of, whether in the composition or some of the ins and outs of electronics.
Gotcha. Well, I don't want to discredit the wildlife. I know we've kind of put it on the back burners speaking of this so far, but there actually are some pretty unique opportunities to see wildlife. So with the last few minutes we have here, 5 or so minutes, Gene. Oh, I forgot again. The human element. Excuse me, sorry guys. Matt, do you want to speak a little bit about what we're looking at here as far as another activity in relation to the human element of this trip?
Yeah, it's just there's you know, the arid landscapes that make up the West force people to live in certain ways, and it's a unique existence, whether it's in the prehistory, in times past with the indigenous peoples that have lived here, and even in modern times, people are having to find unique ways of essentially finding water and utilizing it to live out their lives. So it's an interesting story, and we'll get to tell that on the trip.
And this site right here is something that you'll get to see on the trip.
Yeah, this is Parowan Gap. This is a petroglyph site. This is rock art that was inscribed into the rock over roughly 1,500 to 1,000 years ago. So pretty cool.
All right, now here we go, Gene. Let's talk a little bit about some of the wildlife opportunities we may have here. And as I just click through these photos, if you just want to give me a little tidbit about what we're looking at here.
Yeah, amphibians, once again, one of these surprise creatures taking advantage of the seeps. Water may be coming through the rock, and it's been percolating through for 1,000 years, but it comes out, and the wildlife is taking advantage of that, waiting. western toad. This is a California condor. So I spent a lot of time researching this bird at Grand Canyon National Park, where I worked, and also on the North Kaibab Rim, the Forest Service. So here we have a picture of one of these iconic condors, one of the reintroduction sites of this highly endangered bird. You're looking for this guy. The pronghorn antelope. Traditionally a little more higher in elevation outside of Bryce and inside Bryce National Park. This is the fastest land mammal in North America. So you got to look quick, but you're looking for this guy.
I've always referred to these as speed goats. Is that the appropriate technical term for them?
Well, yes, if you can run 55 to 60 miles an hour, I would call you a speed goat. And here's the desert bighorn sheep. So it's a subspecies of the Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep. So it's very well adapted to these rocky landscapes and also lack of water. So they don't need to drink as much water as we see up in the Intermountain West and as we go north into Canada.
Okay. I think that's all I have on the wildlife here. Guys, before we open the door to questions from Kendall and the listeners, do you have anything to add, anything we may have skipped over that you'd like to rehash or go back and touch on?
No.
Renata, any COVID related stuff that you'd like to reiterate?
I'll just reiterate the flexibility is key when it comes to all things COVID, and we're always looking at those main priorities that I started with and revisiting our protocols on a weekly basis as everything surrounding COVID is changing. So we'll be sure, as I noted before, to update you if there are any changes or expectations that we need to set differently for you based on our protocols.
Yeah, and ultimately our goal here for those listening and joining us in the field on these trips is to run an incredible natural habitat adventures trip. That's our goal, is to maintain the genuine aspects of these trips. And really the only things that are changing is some of these COVID protocols. So fear not, we are still running high-end world-class tours as normal as we always do. Just with a mask on our face and a little bit of separation between us and our fellow travelers. So with that, Kendall, I think we're ready to open the door to any questions you might have waiting for us.
Great, thank you. You guys have clearly done a wonderful job because we have one question for you. So I just want to encourage anyone watching, if you do have questions for our panel today, you can submit those in your control panel under the questions field. All right. Is the Mule Ride included in the cost of the trip, or do you have to pay for it separately?
Go ahead, Renata.
Oh.
Included.
It's included.
All right. Well, that was the only question we had today. So great job, everyone.
That means
I
I'll take a moment here to put Matt on the spot. This is something I've been wanting to do now. Matt, I would like to hear a joke.
God. No. I only have one good joke, and I'm going to tell you, and it may backfire, but we'll see. So this is age sensitive. So it's a 97-year-old gentleman walking down the road. He sees a bar and he's like, I'm going to go in and have a drink. So he goes into the bar, sits down, and he's having a nice conversation with the bartender. And the doors fly open, and in walks a 94-year-old woman, and she is dressed to kill. She comes sauntering up to the bar and sits down next to the older gentleman, and the older gentleman looks at her and says, "Do I come here often?"
Great job, Matt.
Oh,
then I found that right. I'm sure I'm just got a barrel of laughs going on in this very quiet crowd. I hope that's the case.
Yeah. We did have a comment come in during your joke, Matt. Nothing to do with your joke. This person wants you to convince them that they do not need to bring a 400 millimeter lens.
Oh, convince them not to. You know what? Bring it. Just bring it. I would say that I'd say that 60% of the time we're probably focusing maybe a little more on kind of on landscapes. And then there are instances like with desert bighorn and a few other species like pronghorn where a really long lens might be useful. So, but I would say that a majority of your time will be spent photographing more of the landscape stuff than a preponderance of wildlife. Does that, if you can bring it and you can get that in your suitcase, I have no problem with it. And if you want to carry it around, that's great.
All right, great. Thank you, Matt. Well, nothing else has come in. So again, wonderful job, panel. I think you answered everyone's questions during the presentation, so great job. I do want to remind everyone who's watching, though, if a question does come up pertaining to your trip, just give us a call at the office. You can speak to your adventure specialist. They're always happy to help you out. All right, everyone, I'm going to turn it back over to you guys for closing comments. We'll start with Renata.
Thank you guys again for joining, and I hope everyone is incredibly excited about their trip. I have been to these parks quite a bit with NatHab, and I always come back a lot more refreshed than when I went, and it's just such amazing places to be in. So really excited for you guys, and enjoy.
And Jean?
I hope you enjoy canyons as much as I do. It's going to open your mind, refresh you, provide new insight, new discoveries. It's so worth it.
And Matt?
It's a spectacular setting, and it's unlike any other place in the world. And we fill your time in a big way on this trip, and I think you'll walk away from it changed forever. And the other thing is I only have one joke, and I just told it, so it's a good thing.
Lower your expectations for the trip, right?
And Corbin?
Yeah, thanks, guys. It's always a pleasure working with all of you, Kendall, yourself included. I'm so happy that we can kind of see the light at the end of this pandemic tunnel, and we're starting to get back out there. So I hope you guys enjoy the trips that you are scheduled on, and they run as smooth as I know that they're capable of, and certainly will. And Renata, thanks again for all the work you do in the office with all the COVID protocols, and then Jean and Matt, excuse me. I hope to see you guys out in the field. So with that, Kendall, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you. You four did a wonderful job again. Thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And thank you everyone who tuned in. Again, remember to contact your adventure specialist at the office if you have any further questions. We did record today's presentation, and we'll get the replay out to you soon. And with that, I'll conclude the webinar. Bye everybody, have a great weekend.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.